All right. Looks like we're live again. Skip's here already. I'm still just a few seconds before 8 o'clock. Wanted to kick it off just a few seconds early so that we could get rolling right away. All right. James is here. Perfect. Crowd's building. Troy's here. Awesome. Jimmy. John Kellerman. Awesome. Got all the big names showing up tonight. All right. Leo's here. Douglas. There we go. Good evening, folks. All right. Welcome to No BS Woodworking Tuesday Tips. Tonight we are going to do some curved dovetails. I said last time that I didn't know which topic I was going to do, so I decided to do the curved dovetails because, well, it's just fun. So I've got all the stuff laid out here, and we're going to go over some of it, and I am just trying to waste a few seconds and let everybody else log in before I just start jumping on. We have a good-sized crowd already. Thanks. That's awesome. Here we go again. Kevin's here, so we can start. I'm assuming somebody said they could hear just fine. I'm assuming you can hear and see me. That is the plan. If it's not happening, please throw something up immediately into the chat. All right. So I'm also going to try a couple of new things here tonight. You can see here on the bench that I've got some pre-cut parts here, and some of this was done with some router jigs that I had made up. So I actually pre-recorded the use of the router jigs on here. So hopefully when we get to that point and I show you what they are and how we did them, the video plays just fine. If not, you'll have to listen to a verbal description. So I am going to get started doing the curved dovetails. So what really brought this about was a few weeks back, I taught a class on the Wharton Esherick library stair, which is, if you guys listen to, and hopefully you're seeing the library stair on your screen at this time. This is at the Wharton Esherick Museum. And this was a class that I had taught, when we had done it as part of 360 Woodworking when I was living in Cincinnati. And it was really one of the most fun classes that I've ever taught because, well, woodworking is all about problem solving, and that's the part that I really like the most. And trust me, there's a lot of problem solving in this project. It's awesome. The great thing is we got started on it in Cincinnati, and most everybody that took the class there just basically did the dovetails flat. Just they took two square edge boards like what I've got here and joined them together and then just curved the outside afterwards, which is not how Wharton Esherick, the guys at Wharton Esherick Studio did the joinery. They actually made the joint curved to follow the arc of the outside of the stair. And when I decided to run the class again, now that I'm, 10 or 12 years down the road with it, uh, that was one of the things that was really driving me is I wanted to see if there was a methodology where I could uh, help people get there to do the curved joinery and um, and not have to worry about inconsistencies. And you'll see what I'm talking about here shortly. So oh, so you just, Dan says he doesn't like he wants me to refocus on me, not on the stairs. Okay. Um, I haven't really shown you anything that was beyond that set of stairs. Uh, so the idea was that the outside of the risers and the ends of the treads on that piece follow a specific arc. And what I wanted to show you first was, well, these are representative. They're not meant to look like the pieces that Warden Esherick did, but this would be what I would call the tread portion of the stair. And what I've got in the vise here is representative of the riser. And the whole idea here is the riser needs to be out of thicker material because we're going to curve it. The tread really doesn't have to be anything but the final thickness, because the only thing that gets curved on it is the very end. So regardless of how I do this, and I wanted to show you the method that I used for getting the curves on. If you guys looked at the photo that was just a thumbnail that was advertising this episode tonight, that's off of a piece that I've been working on, and I curved the risers all by hand. And when we started in the class, that presented certain problems in that when you create the arc, it needs to be fairly uniform in order to be able to do the joinery. So the first thing I did was I created my pattern. And for this, you'll see in a minute that I have a pattern for the tread, which is sort of that funky fan shape. And the end of it has this nice arc on it. And that's fairly simple. That becomes just a straightforward lay the pattern onto the piece. I have a center line drawn, not centered on the board, but the center on the width of the pattern. Here, I lay the pattern on top of it and traced it off. And that's where we're going to jump over to the first video, because I'm going to show, I took it to the bandsaw once I traced the end off. I sawed it a little heavy of my line, so I left my line plus a little bit of white space there. And then what I did was took it over to the router table and stuck the pattern to the top. And then I used a top bearing bit. So it's a pattern bit where no, actually for this one, I used a flush trim bit. So sorry, the other way, it was a bottom bearing. But you'll see that in a second, because I'm going to switch over and we're going to run the video. So there you see, I've already got it cut out, a little heavy of my line. I'm going to throw on a little bit of double face tape and just stick it right down to my riser blank. And again, my riser blank is parallel up the sides, and you can see that the actual tread pattern has that sort of oar or paddle shape to it at the bottom. And because it was a consistent arc, all I needed to do was set the pattern down so that it was relatively parallel to the end. The end is wide, and that gave me a place to start my pattern routing. So bottom bearing bit, bottom is facing up in a router table. That was about it. All right. So by letting that pattern hang over both sides, I had a good place to start and stop where I wasn't engaging the router directly into the material that was overhanging the pattern. If you're only going to do one of something, which I don't know why you would only do one of something other than just practice, you could fare the curve in by hand. But the great thing about this is this stair needs 3 treads. The treads are all exactly the same. So I actually ended up pattern routing even the sides, that fan shape. And then that little block out the back of the pattern that you saw was for the through tenon that goes into that central post. Once I've got that part done, and I'm going to switch over to the other camera here, and I'm going to show you how I marked out for the riser, and I'm going to mark it all out here on the square piece of pine. So the first thing I'm going to do is bring it up in close, and I'm going to get it lined up so that it's flush on the edges and flush on the back. And now I'm going to switch the camera, and I'm going to bring the camera in first so that you guys aren't being shaken around as I'm moving the camera. Once again, I know I'm breaking all the rules showing you the camera thing, but you'll see what's happening here in a second when I switch over to the opposite camera. I'm going to widen up just a tiny bit. Boo. All right, switch cameras. Yeah, Dan, no need for a starter pin because the pattern was hanging over on both sides of the of my part that I was cutting, and that way I could go right up against the plywood pattern out here, and then just route straight across, and it was projecting out on either side, so I was hitting plywood both times. So what I did was I took the tread material and I'm lining it up so it's flush on both sides. The really cool thing about this is, I mean, you might want to make a jewelry box with curved sides or something, and this is a good way to kind of create the joints themselves. So I've got it lined up where I want it, and I'm just going to trace it off. You could scribe it with a knife if that's your thing. And then at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I can go over to my bench vise, which I will move the board and then the camera. So we'll be lacking something of interest for a few seconds until I can get this sort of readjusted here. There we go. And you can see I've got the arc on there. I'm going to slide these a little more forward. The other thing I'm going to do, besides block the camera, is I'm going to extend these lines right down the side here. So what I'm doing is where this arc comes up and comes into the deepest part here, all I'm doing is extending it down the side, making the side parallel. And if I'm so inclined, I could also take that It's hard to do this with all this stuff in the way. So if I transfer those over to the, I guess I should have done this first. Live woodworking, folks. I didn't even edit the router video. So all I'm doing is I've transferred those marks from the other end up the side of my board, popped them around the corner. Now if I take my arc and I just connect the dots, I now have that same arc on both ends of the board. So if I flip it around, you can see this is what I had traced off at the other vise. I'm going to set this into position here. And the first thing we want to do is attack the convex side of this thing, because that's the easiest one to do. We have the pattern already, which is our tread board. I've already cut and faired that in. You can fair it in by hand, or you can make a jig. A flush trim pattern. And then what you're going to do is mark it on both ends the way that I did here, trace it here, parallel those lines down the side, connect it. And then what I want to do is go in. I'm working with my scrub plane. So this is my number 5, and it has about an 1/8 inch camber. And what I'm going to do is just work my way right to my scribe line. And the reason I'm using the scrub plane is I'm removing a massive amount of material pretty quickly. Once we get a little farther along here, I will switch to the little smooth plane that I had over there. I'm pretty close. Now the fun thing with the Escherich stair is that arc didn't necessarily follow perfectly all the way down. I could work this end just as much as this end and make it a perfect curve. So if you were doing that jewelry box or a small chest for someone, and you wanted the whole side curved, that's fine. You'll just spend more time working on hitting the lines that I have drawn. I know. I don't have to do this because, well, number one, these are just stunt dovetails. Now I'm getting a little bit of tear out on that side, but if I switch over to my little smooth plane, I can start getting rid of all of those concave plane marks that I left behind with my scrub plane. And it'll also take care of a good bit of the tear out because it's set a lot finer and it's a smooth plane. I mean, it's meant to make things smooth. Leonard says he's late to the party, but not so much. We're doing good. You're catching this thing at a good time. So you can see I've got I'm following my line fairly closely. I could take a little more off of this side, but not a whole lot. And once I have that arc faired in on the outside here, then it's going to be fairly easy to, yeah, no, that's pretty good. I feel a little bit of a flat in the middle, but that's okay too. Doesn't need to be there, it's gone. Doesn't need to be 100%, just needs to be most of the way to where we want it. All right, so I've got a nice faired arc there. And if I set up my marking gauge to the thickness that I want, in this case, it's going to be about 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to, yeah, you can't see that because I'm kind of tight on my, so my tread is 3/4. So all I'm going to do here is pull this thing in, set it about 3/4. So I'm going 3/4 by 3/4 on this. And now that I've got the outside marked or shaped in, I can just use my marking gauge to create the concentric arc for it here. So I'll stick this in that marking gauge line. And now I'm going to go back in with my scrub plane and start working that inside surface. Okay, and the object here is I want to try and keep a uniform thickness. I'd say you need it to be fairly accurate for at least the first inch and a half. So because that's where your joinery is going to go, and you don't really want to have this section tapering out too quickly because it's going to affect your dovetails overall. The primary difference between this and straight dovetails is this single arc. So that section, we need to make it the same as you would if you were just joining two flat boards. So it needs to be relatively parallel in the area in which the joinery is going to happen. And I'm not going to do this whole thing because, you know, it's going to take another 15 minutes or so to sort of scrub plane that down until I'm happy. Saying a lot tonight. It's live woodworking, folks. So again, the idea here is take the scrub plane, work the center section pretty heavily. Sort of take it down towards my line, and you're going to get the idea here. So let's just assume that I took it down far enough that I was happy with it where it is, or I have a desperate amount more I need to take off of there. I could also use a scorp. Going a little slower because I'd already done a little bit of the scrub planing in there. And the idea here is I can remove an awful lot more material with that scorp because it doesn't have the width of the sole riding on the high points, making it hard to get into that corner. But this is really sort of roughed in at this point. Okay. I mean, I can then go back in with my scrub plane and work that area down, and then eventually go back in with my smooth plane, and or I could also, I'm using a round faced spoke shave here. And the idea is I want to fare that down. So the scorp would be the roughing tool. It's going to leave the deepest valleys. Then I go back in with the scrub plane, which is going to leave shallower valleys. If I can get in there with my smooth plane, that's what I'm going to do. If I can't, then I'm going to try and go in there. And you can see I'm sort of skewed here, and I'm going slightly, about a 45-degree angle across there. And if I feel it, the curve is fairly smooth, although it's still kind of flat at the ends. And again, I wasn't really going to, Kevin, yeah, that was a number 2. I mean, you can see I still have another 1/8 of an inch to go. I don't want to spend 20 minutes hand planing a board on camera anyway. It's not about the planing. The idea is I want to keep this a fairly uniform thickness all the way across, and it needs to be fairly uniform, not only in the arc direction, but it also needs to be perpendicular to the end of the board. It needs to be fairly uniform in thickness, because when we cut the pins into this board, they're going to go into the tail board, which is our tread. And at that point, if this gets thicker or thinner back here away from this front edge, then it's going to affect the tightness of the joints. So I'm going to switch cameras here. You'll see the other camera on screen for a few minutes, but it's a free show. It's worth every penny you're paying. So again, I've got this shape. And what I looked at with the class that I was teaching was the idea that to get this uniform on 3 different treads multiple times was going to be kind of difficult. So what I did was I created a jig where I used the pattern for my tread, and I cut the end of I flush trimmed another piece of plywood, having that same arc on the end. It was wider. So I had a fair in the 2 ends, and then I used that same pattern to lay it on the other end, and I scribed the hollow side. Technically, it's not perfectly concentric to the arc that I have on the end of the tread, but it was pretty close. I knew what the radius was, and I struck it, and then I struck it again at a 3/4 inch smaller radius, and it wasn't even the pencil thickness off. So I could just take that same pattern, put it on the end of the board, trim this end convex, bring it down here, mark it, and then shape that one concave. And I was pretty close. And what that allowed me to do was set up my riser board on there and route the outside, and then move down to the other end of the jig and route the inside. And that's the other video I want to show you right now. Let's see how this goes. There we go. So I have the jig made, and I'm putting the outside in first. Good evening, Bob. You're doing just fine. And this is now a top bearing bit. You can see the bearing is in the router table, the bearing is on the bottom, and all the cutting is going up from there. And again, I made the jig wider so that I could start on the piece of plywood that was hanging out instead of starting directly into the material that I wanted to cut. And I ran twice and still ended up missing that very end. You'll see here in a second. Oh no, I did that, no, on the other side, sorry. So now if I flip the jig around, that was the convex side. And now I've got the concave side. I'm making it in the exact same order that I would do it by hand because they're the easiest ways to follow this thing. So the jig is going to leave me just about a 3/4 inch remainder on this piece of pine. Oh, forgot that corner. And I was running everything twice in case the bit pushed away and left a little bit of extra. You got to be just about done there. Yep. So now you can see I've got a nice uniform piece. All right. So I've got a nice uniform cut on my piece here that comes around. And I'm going to bring the other camera in. I want to lose this because this is the one I'm actually going to use. And what I did was I did both ends of this board, mostly as a safety measure in case I really screw up the pins on here. During the demo, I have a second one that I can jump right in and do. But if I set this up in the vise, I'm going to throw that number 2 over there as a support. I can drop that down just a little bit, and then I'm going to switch cameras and get you guys in close so that you can see. I'm going to set it just slightly away. I will switch cameras. Wow, we weren't even all that far off camera. There we go. So what you can see by looking at it here is having used the same pattern to create the arc in the vertical piece, they made up fairly well. And then, looking at that inside, it's basically just kind of paralleled off of it. And what that allows me to do, and this is about 3/4 of an inch, it's slightly smaller actually. So if I take this and I set it to the thickness of my tread, which I think I've already done, but no, it's a little thin. So I'll bring it up a little more. And that tread has to go down into this pin board or my riser this much. And because it's regular dovetails, I'm going to mark the inside and the outside faces just on the curve. Okay. And for you guys at home that can't see my scribe line, or for me here in the shop that I can't see my scribe line, I'm going to mark it with a little bit of green to tell me where to stop. Well, it keeps jumping out there. All right. So where I can sort of stop sawing. And the big thing here is, and I'm going to swing you guys a little closer. Yeah, the other reason I didn't want to stand there and hand plane that whole interior of that piece was I'm already standing in a, half an inch or so of shavings as it is. You can see them on the floor there. If I would have hand planed the rest of that inside, it would have been worse. So I'm going to set just like regular dovetails, you can make your dovetails any angle you like. So I kind of like this tonight. I'm going to leave about 3/8 of an inch on either side. And again, division, how I divide them up really is fairly irrelevant to the actual technique of cutting dovetails. I'm just going to stick 4 on here because time constraints. So I'm going to step a little off of either side of my center lines. Come back. Now, here's the thing with curved dovetails. You might look at this and go, those pins look a little funky. Unfortunately, they don't at the moment, not to my eye anyway, although this one looks like it's sort of leaning in that direction. That doesn't mean that I have to have the exact same angle here. I could adjust my angle so that this one looks more acute than that one, at least to my eye. So really, I could make my pins a little bit more parallel. You could also cut your tails first on this. There's no hard and fast rule for this. You'll just be doing it wrong. Square those lines down. And this is the great thing. If you were say you were making a jewelry box or a small chest, valuables chest for someone, yourself or your wife or your girlfriend, hopefully not one for each. The idea would be I could run this pattern on both ends of the board, and now when I go back with my hand plane, all I have to do is hand plane down to this level on both sides, just connect the dots essentially, connect this line to the one down the other end to finish shaping the board itself for the interior of the chest and the exterior. I can now remove the waste between my pins. So I'm going to just set up here and do a little bit of quick sawing. Fun to do with the camera in the way. This one's going to be nice and fun because I can't even reach around the camera to get the saw started. I'm going to reach right through the tripod. If the shot gets a little wobbly, no, I'm not. I can't even do it. All right. There we go. And if I was doing this repetitively or in something much harder than nature's own styrofoam here, white pine, I probably would have put a backer piece. It's not even on camera, but I was getting a little bit of twist out of it here as I was sawing down this end, getting a little bit of wiggle. So I probably would have put a a spacer block in here and a clamp down this end to make things a little bit tougher. More rigid, not tougher. I don't know what's going on tonight. My grasp of the English language has left me. Some of you guys are probably sitting there thinking, what grasp? All right. So I'm going to move over here. Yeah. Once again, not edited for your viewing pleasure. And hey, I forgot my hold fast. So I'm going to take 5 seconds and go over here and grab one. I set it up to work on the hold fast, and then I forgot to pick one up off the bench. All right. And actually, I probably ought to start on the inside surface, because the outside of this is, if I'm keeping my suspension of disbelief going here, this is the inside of my tread where I'm not going to actually see it. So much like I cut my regular through dovetails, and if you guys have ever seen me do this at the woodworking show, or you're taking a class, or you have my DVD, I usually step back about 3/4 of the way to the end of the waist, drive or push the chisel in, and then just twist the chisel a little bit. That scribe that I got from my wheel marking gauge really just breaks off right at that nice clean scribe line that I get from that marking gauge. Sometimes it breaks off where it's supposed to. Oh boy. All right. And what this is doing is this gives me a nice shoulder to put my chisels up against. The other reason to only go with 4 dovetails here was you guys don't want to sit here for an hour watching me cut 47 dovetails into a board. So technically speaking, I'm probably going to get a little bit more bounce on my chop cuts here than I would get out of a flat board, because this area right here isn't being supported. You know, it's hanging up in the air. So now I can set my chisel right up against that scribe line. I am still just slightly undercutting, about 3 to 5 degrees. Not 15 or 20, not 45. Because get on the line, will you? So I'm making all the chop cuts first, and what's happening is I'm driving it in until the waste fibers pinch against the bevel on the chisel and stop me from going down farther. And then at that point, I need to remove. You can hear that even sounds a little hollow down that end because it's bouncing some. And because my pins get the sockets here gets narrower at the top, I'm not going to come in and take it off the end, because I stand a chance of knocking the corner off the pin. So if I just follow that 3/4 or so out to the end of the board, you can see I can pop the waste right out of there. I'm going to go down about halfway. Yeah. Kind of like watching paint dry, isn't it? And then I can take another chop cut. And the idea here is the chop cuts are the things that are, they're the business end of this. This is what's severing those waste fibers so that I can remove it pretty rapidly. And I'm going to go down about half the thickness, so about 3/8. And I always do this. If you're an engineer, you do not need to measure this. I said about 3/8. If you get a quarter or you get 7/16, nobody's going to die. Yeah, Don. Yes, makes a lot of sense not to contour the full length of the board before cutting the dovetails. It does. You don't have to worry about this thing rocking all over. So I'm down about halfway with the chop cuts. I can flip it over. Yes, that's a blue spruce mallet that I'm using, but it's a prototype that they made last year after the woodworking shows. It's a urethane product that they made. They were supposed to have released it, so I don't know if they're available or not. I never bothered to check. Same process on this side. Come chop in a little bit, about 3/4 of the way out to the end. Push the chisel in and twist. And you see I'm snapping off right at my scribe line. Hopefully you can see that. I mean, I can zoom the camera in a little. You know, we have the technology. There we go. Much better. I mean, I can even see it now. So again, about 3/4 of the way out. I tend to work bevel down because that way I'm not flipping the chisel back and forth. But if you want to work bevel up, then, you know, knock yourself out. I don't hang out in your shop usually. All right. I say that because there are a few of you that are on tonight that I have been to your shops. All right. So if I chop those out, you can see I get a nice deep shoulder line there. And what that does, again, just like on my flat dovetails, I can put the chisel right up against that scribe line now, tip it 3 to 5 degrees past 90, and just knock that waste right out of there. See? No measuring. And I still made it happen, I think. We're most of the way done here. Uh-oh. That felt a little more solid. This was not the end that was really bouncing. That was the one over the other side there that popped out of there pretty quickly. All right. Now I can stand this up in the vise. Yeah. I'm trying to get it set. I know I'm blocking the camera. Once again, free show. Back up just a tiny bit. What you'll notice is I have a few fibers sticking up there. I'm going to go to a slightly narrower chisel. I am slightly undercut inside here, which is fine. It's all end grain, so I'm going to slice off any fibers that are sticking up. I'm going to impede my dovetails from going together here, kind of like that. And this stuff right in the corner here. And now I can go back. I am not chiseling away at the sawn surfaces. I've tried to saw fairly square to the end of my board. Ooh, and that little tear out there, right there. Can you see it on camera? Telephoto in. It's right here. You know, that's exactly why I work from the outside in, because that way, if it blows out inside there, it's inside the box. Nobody sees it. Or it's easier to glue it and patch it and do all of that kind of stuff, and nobody sees it. You know? I know it seems like I do things haphazardly most of the time, but once in a while, there's actually some thought that goes into this stuff. All right, let's get the dovetail chisels out of the way. Let's make sure there aren't any major Bob says he thinks I've done this before. No, this is my first set today. Let's set this. So I need to set this right to the thickness of that part that I made at the router table there. Widen up a little. And now what I can do is I can take that marking gauge and scribe the baseline for my tails. And again, I'm just kind of darkening the line so you guys can see it on camera, because I'm not sure how well it's going to show up on camera. I'm trying to make them nice and deep so that you can see. Again, I'm following that curve. I did match the outside of this to the outside curve on that piece. Somehow I didn't bother to throw my triangle on here. So I'm going to make this the right side of a triangle. And just for laughs, I'm going to make that the peak of the triangle. So I'm going to put the peak of the triangle up. Yeah. I'll move the camera. And what I'm going to do, except that I drew it on the wrong side. Try again. So the inside of the peak of my triangle is here. So inside surface, peak of my triangle is now facing down towards the inside surface of the tread board. Line it up. Great thing about pins first, gravity works every time you see no hands. Thing is standing there on its own. If I had cut them tails first, I would tell you the exact same thing, because I would lay the tail board on top there. I'm going to give gravity a little assist with my right hand, and then just mark these off with my left hand. Good sharp pencil or a marking knife. Get it angled so that the point is right into the corner. If you're using a marking knife, you want that marking knife flat up against the cheek cuts of those pins. So now it's pretty straightforward. I just got to cut those. So I'm going to throw them in the vise here. Yeah, I know you can't see it. I'm just tightening a vise. That was always the fun part about having a live audience doing this kind of stuff at the woodworking shows, is invariably I would start to put the thing in the vise and somebody would go, camera, I can't see. So, and if you're so inclined, which I am tonight, because for whatever reason, they seem to be zoning here, I'm going to square those transfer lines across the top with a square. And the idea here is this is the line I'm going to follow, simply because that's the one I traced off of the riser board. this line across the top is just going to be a guideline because there's no guarantee that I have it perfectly aligned with my transfer marks. Okay? So again, maybe I'll try and move the camera over this side. Yeah. And this way, maybe it won't be in my way for making all these cuts. So now, and what I want to do, that's waste, that's waste, that's waste, that's waste, and that's waste. Right? So if I start, what I want to do is just leave my pencil line behind, or my knife line, because when I marked these things, my transfer line was into the waist area of the pin, because I mean it's in that waist area by the thickness of the pencil line, because my pencil line was riding against the cheek of my pin, or conversely, if I would have done tails first, it would have ridden against the cheek of my tail. So I need to just leave my pencil line. If I get rid of it entirely, I'm going to have gappy dovetails. So none of this changes from straight dovetails other than the fact that I'm arcing my way through here. All right. So I saw those two outsides, the vertical cuts. But now what I can do is I can drop this back in horizontally. I can connect those two lines if I really need to, but we're closing in on 9 o'clock, so let's wrap this up. Clean that corner out. Yeah, now's the time. Why not? I have it in place. So I'm just cleaning down to my baseline. If I missed my baseline there, and anything that is sticking up into that corner, which there were a couple of fibers on the side of that tail, now I can flip it over, get that down a little lower, do the same thing on that side, connect here and here. And here's the thing, unless you're making a super sharp curve to all of your stuff here, each segment for these pins ought to be fairly flat. I'm going to move over here. Oh, I just lost my camera. Hold on, folks. Technical difficulties. What did I lose and how did I lose it? We're still plugged in. I'm seeing everything, but I'm not seeing it. Oh, great. You guys are watching through my laptop camera at the moment. Let's see if we can pull it back up there. Bingo. I don't know what I did. I pulled the cord out somewhere. You know, this is I think our 19th or 20th episode, and I haven't totally trashed because I got nowhere to hold that. My things over a little bit there. Still want them on the screen. Of course, I'm going to cover up the screen when I throw my... All right. And that's the outside. So once again, I'm going to start on the inside surface. How do I know that's the inside surface? I got my triangle mark on there. And because I use a Western saw, it cuts on the push stroke. All that little tear out is on the outside of my box or my tread, my riser. Well, I don't even know what I'm doing at this point. All right. Same basic process. Come out about 3/4 of the way, peel up the first layer, right back to the scribe line. Much easier in white pine than it would be, say, in white oak. Right up against my scribe line, about halfway down. And the great thing about peeling back to that scribe line like it does is it leaves just enough of a shoulder that when you do the chop cut, you can make a pretty heavy chop cut and you won't walk back past the line. That's really the only reason to do it. You can see it's a pretty much a time saver here. Push it in, peel out, peel out, peel out, a little more, tiny bit more. And let's wrap it up. So the big takeaways here for tonight are the more parallel and the more accurately you can shape the concave and convex parts and make them match, the better this whole thing is going to fit together in the end. It's going to cause you a lot less problems. Yes, that's a little tip there. If I just tap the ends of my pin waist for the pin sockets there, it pushes it back down into the hole, and then I can take a chisel and drive it straight out, and it doesn't bind, it doesn't. So take it for what it's worth, folks. Once again, free lesson. I know, move the camera. And then I'll go see if you guys have any questions at all once we get through this. So narrow chisel, the only thing I'm going to do is go in, because I've already cleaned up the two outsides pretty much. There I can see my scribe line. I need a slightly wider chisel. And I can see a little bit of my scribe line there. You can see this really flexing. Let's clean up the junk in here. Again, not chiseling away at my sawn surfaces, because if I've done this right, and I don't know what will I do if I haven't, we'll have to do some chiseling at this somewhere on something to get this stuff to fit together if I haven't done it right. But much like Bob said, probably not my first shot at this. So I've got a little bit of stuff right in that corner that was sort of hanging out there. Here, I'll show you, because you should be able to flip the camera. Nope, not wide, close up. So if we're looking right there, you can see the line is nice and straight, and then it bumps over right about where my finger is. Okay, so what I need to do, that's just fibers where I stopped sawing. So the only thing I'm removing, I'm using a wider chisel, using the back of the chisel up against the cheek of that tail, and I'm extending that line down. I'm not removing any of the sawn surface. I'm just removing the things that were hanging out there. So now if I rotate that up, now you can see it's a nice straight line. Okay. All right. Let's widen up a good bit. We'll flip this over. So triangle inside is facing up. I'm going to slide it back this way. We'll take the pin board. Let me get that 15-pound sledge real quick. Ooh. Gently tap all that nonsense together. Throw that under there. Maybe, just maybe, I can hold it up. And then I will take the camera. Woohoo! Dovetails on a curve. Yeah, you can see I have a little bit of there. That was sticking out. So not so bad. Pretty decent set for just rolling through it here as we talked. All right. Take your screenshots now. I'm going to switch cameras again. We're going to go wide. All right. And then I can get this out of the way without making everyone seasick as I do it. So at the end of the day, it's kind of a fun thing to try. It will, the first time you do it, you'll think I'm absolutely insane for saying it isn't really that much different than flat dovetails. But once you've done it once or twice, you'll really get the hang of it, and it's pretty easy. Number one, don't start on the project that you want a finished set of dovetails with the first time. Try it on some scrap boards, pretty easy to do. You know, I just happened to I had some scraps of pine left over from a spice box class from a couple of months back, and there we go. And it had a big old knot in it, so we weren't going to use it for much of anything else anyway. You know, the big takeaway is the more accurately you can get all of this stuff shaped, both the outside convex curve and then the matching inside concavity, the easier this whole process of cutting the dovetails is going to be. So let's see what you guys have for questions here. All right, so I'm starting. I don't think I missed anything earlier. Good evening, late to the party. Looks like a 2 or a 3. Right, we got through the, I think you've done this before. And Dave says, is this how you check to see who's still paying attention? I'm not sure what you're referring to, Dave, as this, but the whole process here was to see if anyone's still awake. You know, put it together at the end. Oh, wow, we have a good crowd still. You guys are crazy hanging out this long. I'll have to watch this one again and maybe again. Peter says, well done. Great material, Chuck. Thanks, Dave. I need to talk to you at some point too. Just get a few more little details. At this point, I assume you just plane down the curve. That's it exactly. You know, at that point, I can take this riser board out of there. Like I said, since I've routed both ends on the curve, I can just connect the dots, do the inside, or if you're going to make a, like I said, if you're going to make a chest or a box or something with swelled sides on it as a jewelry box or a valuables chest or something like that, you could easily leave the inside square. And at that point, what you're going to want to do is set the router so it's more accurately to this thickness for routing that inside curve. There's nothing wrong with leaving this whole inside flat if that's what you'd like to do. Again, this was just, they're fun dovetails to try. I mean, everybody and their mother gets on the internet, gets in a class, and we cut, drawer dovetails and case dovetails, and they're all flat through dovetails all the time. So, why not try something a little different? And this is that little twist, it's going to throw you for that little curve, pun intended, and hopefully make you pay a little bit more attention to how you mark and how you lay things out and all of that stuff. So I don't think anybody next time white oak. Yeah, I'm losing the camera. Did we lose the camera feed? Dave? Someone? Can you not see me? I hope you can. It looks like you're still there. I'm seeing a stream. Hopefully you see it. Losing the camera feed. He's saying losing the camera feed was how I see if everybody was paying attention. No, that's how I change it out for the stunt dovetails, the ones that I spent 4 hours on earlier today and made the perfect ones. So that way, if I move it over and the camera goes out, I can swap out whatever I want. Didn't do that, but next time I'll think about it. Camera feed is good. Thanks. I hope you guys had fun tonight. Again, we've gone about an hour and 10 minutes. I'm gonna just wrap it up real quick here and say thank you for making it all the way to the end here. It was definitely a lot of fun for me. Again, that was why I wanted to do this. We had so much fun playing with it in the class the other week. It was like, hey, I ought to try and throw this in the mix, and I ought to do it while I still have all the steps memorized. I mean, whatever. The idea is, give it a shot. Go into your shop, play around a little bit. What do you got to lose? A little bit of scrap wood. If you like the video, if you're watching this on YouTube, post live, please hit the like button, subscribe, ring the notification bell, because you definitely don't want to miss any of this. So next week, I will see you, and we will do some hammer veneering. Unless something more fun comes up, and then I'll switch it up. You'll find out sooner or later. So thanks, and everybody have a good night or day if you're watching this tomorrow. See ya.